Today's Fireside Chat honors the life and legacy of NASA mathematician Katherine Johnson, whose early space flight calculations were critical to the success of the very first U.S. space mission. Her calculations became the basis for all future journeys into space, including the landing of the first humans on the moon, and sets the stage for the Artemis missions and our return to the moon. Ms. Johnson was recognized for her contributions to the space industry with, among other awards, a Presidential Medal of Freedom awarded by President Barack Obama in 2015. 2 years ago this month, Northrop Grumman named one of its Cygnus satellites the SS Katherine Johnson in honor of her contributions to human space flight safety. Her life and legacy was portrayed in the 2017 movie Hidden Figures. Katherine's 3 daughters are all graduates of Hampton Institute, now Hampton University in Virginia. Joylette Hylick is Ms. Johnson's oldest daughter. She graduated from Hampton with a BS in mathematics and began her professional career at NASA Langley Research Center, where her mother ended her career. I cannot think of a better way to honor Ms. Johnson's legacy than hearing from the beautiful 2 women, the amazing women that are sitting center stage right now. 2 mathematicians, 2 inspirations. I am sure you are just as excited as I am to hear them. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today. Dr. Austin is no stranger to aerospace. She is a native New Yorker. She earned a BA in mathematics from Franklin and Marshall College, a MS degree in system engineering and mathematics from the University of Pittsburgh, and a PhD in systems engineering from the University of Southern California. Dr. Austin is co-founder of Making Space Incorporated. She is a system engineering and leadership development consultant, author, motivational speaker, leader, role model, and businesswoman who is internationally recognized for her work in aeronautics and system engineering. Dr. Austin was the 6th president and CEO of the Aerospace Corporation, being the first and only woman and African American to date to serve in this role. Most recently, Dr. Austin was selected as the lead independent director for Chevron. She also served as interim president of the University of Southern California for the 2018-2019 academic year and led that institution through a crucial transition period. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Wanda Austin as she introduces our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Tonya, and hello, everyone. Really delighted to have you join in on this phenomenal opportunity to have a conversation with Joylette Hylick to share the stories of Katherine Johnson. A little bit, that's right, because 40 minutes is not going to do it much justice, but we're thrilled to have you here and to have an opportunity to really talk about your mother's remarkable journey. And first, just to thank you and your sisters for doing the hard work to capture that journey so that it can be shared around the world and that we can all learn the lessons that she would like for us to have learned as a result of her experience. She lived for a century and she saw a tremendous amount of change. When she started, when she was born in 1918, it was before civil rights, and yet still she received an award from an African-American president of the United States. So I know that her life is really a firsthand witness to many of the changes that we hear about when we talk about African-American History Month or Black History Month. We talk about the efforts to establish historically Black colleges. We talk about the importance of education and the opportunity for education. We talk about segregation and that transition. And so as I ask you a few questions that I know our audience members will want to hear about, that is the backdrop of her life, is that there was a lot going on, but she was very focused on doing her best and being her best. So for the first question I want to ask you is, what was it like having a mom who was so accomplished, so talented, a child prodigy? She graduated from college at age 18. What was the view for you as the daughter of someone who was so accomplished?
Well, first, thank you for having me. Thanks to Sonia and to President and the corporation for inviting us to be here today. And I'm very grateful to Carolyn for making it happen. Mom, as both my sister and I we quote each other all the time. She was just mom, and she was not famous. She said, "Well, I just did my job. What was the work?" So she didn't lecture us. She wasn't a geek. She lived what she wanted us to do. It was more that she did it than telling us what to do. Mm-hmm. And back in the day, I'm probably the oldest person in here. That was back in the day where when your parent looked at you like this, you knew not to do that anymore, or you knew to stop it. Mm-hmm. Today, that doesn't happen. It goes the other way. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. So it was fun. She always kept us busy, which is also what her mother did, because she said she would watch them as they were in school, and often said once to one of the professors, "I think my mother's got a little bit too much. I think Catherine's got a little bit too much time on her hand. Mm-hmm. Give her something to do, mm-hmm. even if it's licking stamps." See, so there was no special. She wasn't treated special. She didn't feel special. She just had love and support around her, discipline, commitment, and the will to do well and to be curious.
You know, that is something that parents have an opportunity to influence their children when they see they have time on their hands, to help them figure out what to do with that time. Because your mother was actually a French major as well as a math major. And how did she come to be a French major?
Well, she said when she was young, she finished high school at 14, but she was having French classes before then, and she said it sounded exotic, and she said, "That's what I want to learn to do." And so when she went to college, she said, "I'm majoring in French." Mm-hmm. And so one of the professors ultimately got to her and said, "You doing what?" He said, "Well, you're going to major in math." And she said, "Well, I'll major in both."
Uh-huh. That's terrific. That's terrific. There was another professor that was very influential in her life, Professor Claytor. And he actually inspired her to become a research mathematician before she knew what it meant to be a research mathematician. How important is it for young people to have teachers who encourage them and help them to see what's possible? Because your mother didn't wake up and say, "Okay, what I want to do is go work for NASA." NASA didn't exist. How important was Professor Claytor in her life?
Well, first he impressed her because he said he came in the classroom, grabbed a piece of chalk, and went to the board. No notes, no books, and just wrote and asked questions or talked. And so she was impressed by that. She said she was always impressed by smart people. She didn't like people wasting time and not using their best, not doing their best. In fact, she always said that do your best. If you do your best, then you can't do anymore. So she started, like I said, in college in French, and somehow they saw the math in her. And he said, "I want you to come to my class, and if you don't come this next semester, I'm coming to find you." So he was engaging her because he was interested. And that's one thing that teachers have to realize. The children are really looking to you for guidance. They don't want it, but they're looking for it. And if you act like you don't care, they see that too. And I often talk to teachers. I never was a teacher. I didn't want to be one, not because of kids, but because of parents and my colleagues. So you have to realize just how important teaching is and how important it is to the children to realize that. So I think he saw that and knew that she didn't. She was young, she didn't. But he said, I'm going to prepare you. So he taught, and at that time, West Virginia State College was one of the HBCUs, and it had a reputation for having a very strong math program. In fact, she said, Mom, she said, they had 2 PhDs at the time, and West Virginia University didn't have any. So they had that reputation to start with. And so he and Mr. Evans and a couple of the others, I knew Mr. Evans, but Dr. Clater died much too young. Mm-hmm. But he saw in it, and he said, I'm going to prepare you for this. And she didn't fight back. See, kids today are so independent, which is good, but then they also may not be smart enough to see what an adult is trying to guide them toward. Mm-hmm. So we have a catch-22 maybe, mm-hmm. where back then, if a teacher said something to me, I didn't say, who are you? Mm-hmm. But today they do. Mm-hmm. And so they lose that. And so part of what we learned then, even she learned years before, I learned before you, pay attention to your teachers. That's why they're so important. Very, very important. And people need to acknowledge it.
And teachers are everywhere. Teachers can be colleagues, teachers can be neighbors.
That's right.
So you have these opportunities. One of the things that impressed me about Dr. Clayton was the fact that his own life was challenged, that he was a very talented mathematician, but he was not able to get the positions that he went after. He was not accepted into the technical societies because of his race. And yet he did not pass on that fear to your mother. He didn't tell her, don't try to be a research mathematician, just the opposite. He really encouraged her. Did she have a sense of how difficult it was, what she was accomplishing, what she was doing? Many times she was the first person. When she went to NASA, did she feel like, I'm going to have to prove myself, I'm going to have to be twice as good?
I don't think so. I don't think she was not a negative person. She wasn't belligerent. She said, well, if you can't let me go this way, I will go that way. And she was always forward thinking and wanted us to be. I remember one time I was in college. I was an honor student in high school, and this has nothing to do with Mom. And I was in a math class. And I sat there, and I was my second year, and I said, I'm going to fail this test. So I went out the side door after the test was over and went to the dorm, and I was crying, and I called Mom. And at our time, there was one phone on a hall. And I called Mom at work at NASA. I said, Mom, I just failed the test. She said, where are you? That's the first thing she said. I said, I'm in the dorm. Don't you have a class now? Yes. Well, don't you think you better get to class? And I did fail the test. I knew what I was talking about. But she didn't dwell on that. She didn't let me dwell on it. And she said, get on with it. So every challenge was every problem, I guess, was a challenge. And she just taught us to ride the waves. Sometimes you have battles. She said, pick your battles. Sometimes you can battle, and sometimes it's better not to at this point. So I think without and talking to my younger friends, the 20-year differences that we have and the problems that we have are so obvious. Back in Mom's day, Granddaddy and my mom were not slaves, but I'm sure they knew of slaves or they came from slaves. But those people didn't talk about those things. And so Granddaddy protected his children from that. But he knew what he wanted them to do. And Kathy and I wanted Mom to tell this story because we wanted Granddaddy to get credit for raising 4 children, 4 of them graduating from college, 2 of them getting advanced degrees. And he did it gently. I don't remember too many whippings that they heard about, but it was always doing something, always learning something, always being busy, helping other people. And that was Mom's big thing. She wanted everybody to know what she knew. It wasn't you would never, if she was sitting here, you would never pick her out for any reason, except being a female maybe, but that's it.
You mentioned your maternal grandfather, and in the book, the quote is, he told her she was just as good as anyone else, but no better. And I think both of those phrases are important. One which is, you don't have to demean yourself to anybody else, but you also don't look down your nose at anybody. And I think, it's important to emphasize both sides of that. So your parents and grandparents passed on this cocoon of safety, but also of self-confidence and also of, positive self-image of the things that you can be. So how did she shape your journey? You said she didn't, require you to become a mathematician, but you did well in math and music and languages. So, how did she influence your career choices and your sister's career choices?
Again, I think it was just, she set the example. She never said, you'll major in math. Like I never said to my son, you'll major in math. It was that I liked it. And I went with her to a program with educators in Pennsylvania once. And they asked her, she was the honoree, and they asked her, how did you make your children want that? And so she said, well, there she is back there, ask her. And the thing was, our house, we didn't hear negative things about math. My dad was a science major too. So again, the impact that adults have on kids, they see you. They might not listen to you, but they see you. And so Mom never said anything bad about math, nor did Dad. And I just got interested because of it, and I liked music. And I was successful at both, but it was, somebody asked me, you do this and you do that? Well, yeah, it was available. So did it. And so music was just as important at the time, but I knew I didn't want to be a professional musician. I also knew I didn't want to teach, so what was left? To go to NASA. And then in college, during the civil rights era, and they started having demonstrations and things, she said, well, you can't participate because if you get a record, when you fill out that, what is it, SR 151, and you say that, then that nixes you from getting a job there. So that was only input, but we did it before we told her. And my sister was down at Greensboro where the 4 were with Jesse Jackson, down there where the demonstrations actually started. So we did a bit of it, but Mom, she was not loud and rowdy. She talked, she said, be assertive and not aggressive. So that's another thing you see within 20 generations. They were quiet. We may have been stating more things about it. The next generation is starting to get loud, and then now they'll say anything. And it helps sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. So she set the example by doing.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go. I liked math. I liked astronomy. She showed us we could go out. Even now, if I worked at it, I can show you where Venus and Mars, 2 or 3 of the satellites of the planets come up and go down. But I know that because of her and her interest. And I liked astronomy. But that was it. She didn't say. She just said, do your work.
It was the family business. I mean, this is what you talked about at home and over the dinner table and math games, and so they just made it fun.
We always did games. Even her mother, they did games. We did games. Kids use their phones. Ladies and gentlemen, have them put the phones down, please. Because with the phones, they don't talk to you. They can call you bad names, and you can't reach them because they're over there on the phone. There's creativity there, and then there's lack of it. And so we were always playing games. When we lived in West Virginia or Virginia in the mountains. Mm-hmm. So on a car trip, what are we doing? Adding the numbers on the license plates. How long do you see a car? Not long, mm-hmm. But we have to add those numbers. If you don't, I'm gonna put you out on the side of the road. It was just a game, and it was always a game, and it was always fun. So it was an idyllic life. It was not, but you just took advantage of opportunities to learn, opportunities to have fun. We had many tragedies, but we get them and keep going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I worked.
Did I answer your question?
You did, absolutely, absolutely. We love the stories. Thank you for sharing them. I was going to say, I worked in this industry for 40 years, and the first time I heard of Katherine Johnson was when she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Obama. And I know that 2 astronauts in particular, Yvonne Cagle and Leland Melvin, also were just delighted to get the opportunity to know your mother and to have some conversations with her. Can you share with us how important it was to them, what it meant to them to get to know her and to know the impact and the influence that she had at NASA?
Well, I checked with Leland a couple of weeks ago just to be sure I was not telling a bad story. I said, when did you meet her? And he didn't meet her until after her retirement and after he joined NASA, which was 87, I think. So it's a while. Mm-hmm. Yvonne met her, I think she said maybe 2004. And then not again until we were at a dinner 20 years later. Mm-hmm. And so afterwards, I said, I know who you are. And it just popped out because we're picture takers, so I had a picture of her. Mm-hmm. And she said, and I got home and I found the picture, not even looking for it. This is destiny. And I sent it to her. I said, that's you in the picture. She said, well, who's that in front? I said, that's Mom. She said, you mean I would have known her 20 years ago? Mm-hmm. And so they both say they wish they had met her much sooner. And Yvonne, they both talk about her a lot. Leland, every time they have a space mission now and he's on TV, I'll text him, he'll text back. And mm-hmm. One time he said, Katherine Johnson's daughters are watching this. And Yvonne she said she couldn't come here today because she has a Black History Month event to do. Uh-huh. She's at Ames in Northern California. Uh-huh. But they just all wish that they had known her when they were working, or to know that she existed to give them something else to shoot for, something to, because I heard the saying, I'm not sure where it started. It's like, you can't be what you can't see.
Uh-huh.
So many of them have said, God, if we'd just known about her. And there's a poem on the back of Mom's funeral program, and I put this whole thing on the program because it meant so much to me. And for 2 years, if I read it, I would cry. So you hear me choking, and I got. But anyway, this was presented to us when we went down to Spelman for one of her 13 honorary degrees. And these people came from Huntsville, Alabama, NASA. And it was a poem that they had written saying that, whatever, it's something like she soared to the stars or to the sky or something. And down near the end, they said, if they had only known her before, how much better they think they might have been. And they had held the poem for the longest time. But when they found out Kathy and I were going down to get the degree, they brought it, and it's a bronze statue that's engraved with this entire poem. And so these are people who lost out and had as a goal for them to say, well, yeah, I can do that, because Mom would say that in a minute. Mm-hmm. She never, she just didn't isolate herself. She was in class. She wanted you to know what she knew. She didn't want to know more than you did. Mm-hmm. Never did. Mm-hmm. And that makes a difference. So then you share. You live in a community. Your community gets better when you work together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And part of the theme for this event is be the change you want to see. And I think those two things go together. If you can see it, you can be it. And we don't realize the opportunity that we all have to be that role model for someone else. Because the fact of wherever we are, there are young people looking at us who are saying, oh, wow, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could be that. I didn't know there were African Americans in those roles. And so I think that, this is really an important message. And we all look at Leland and Yvonne and think how amazing they are. Mae Jameson, I remember, when she became an astronaut, we thought, oh my gosh, this is possible. And so it's just really important.
Excuse me, I have a story about her.
Okay.
I didn't know her personally, but when Mom died, she called Leland and Yvonne. She said, I've got to come. And they said, okay. Well, the funeral was large, but we wanted it to be personable and not highlighted and whatever. And Leland said, she said, I'm so nervous. And she said, but you don't have to be. And the three of them came on stage together, and each of them told their story. You have 2 minutes. Yeah. So. But she was just so excited to be there, and she made the effort to come down from New York for that.
Yeah,
and I didn't, but it showed what it meant to them.
Yeah, very important, very important. Mm-hmm. So your mom has received a tremendous number of awards and accolades. I mean, the building at Langley Research Center now has her name on it, where they're working on the calculations for how we're going to go to Mars. And she received
I wish they'd named it after the team, after that whole presentation.
And she's always tried to recognize everyone who participated, which is tremendous. Christine Darden, for those of you who don't know, was elected into the National Academy of Engineers.
That's wonderful.
Which is another wonderful accomplishment. Were there any recognitions that were most important to her or that stood out as being really meaningful or representative of her legacy?
She said, I was kissed on the cheek by President Obama. That was probably her highlight. Because she didn't ever expect it. And I remember her first honorary degree was in 1998. She says, she had retired, of course, and she said I got this email. She was still reading them at the time. She said, I want from this man with this long name from this school called SUNY, and they want to give me an honorary degree. Can you see what's this about? So I looked it up first. I said, well, first of all, Mom, SUNY is the State University of New York. I looked it up. Second, the long name is the name of the president. And yes, you're going to get the honorary degree, and no, nobody has to call you doctor, because she always said, I didn't earn it. But her colleagues said, well, you knew it all anyway. So, but that was one example. 77, she was in an exhibit in Philadelphia in the Museum of all scientists and engineers, and the lady that drew the pictures of all of them, she said, well, you don't have any men in here, and I mean, in women. And she said, well, I know one. Mom didn't know, so she called. She said, well, do you think I got this invitation to come to this thing? But this was when we had to, everybody had to turn their temperature down to 68. The older people remember that. That was in 77 because of
energy crisis
problems. And so she said, I don't think I can stay in a hotel and the temperature's down there. I said, well, Mom, you can stay with me because I'm across the way. And I said, and I'll take you over there. So she came up for that. And that was in 77. They can't find the permanent exhibit. And Kathy never saw it because we thought permanent meant permanent. So we're still trying to track that down because they said it was damaged, it's been traveling and whatever. So
I understand, but she is being remembered and recognized in so many ways, in so many places. And it's an opportunity for people to hear about her story and to keep her legacy alive, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. So it's great that she's so many honorary degrees. And I know the Silver Snoopy from Leland as well, which I know was
He said, you don't have that? And so that, and when they cut the ribbon on the building, he gave it to her.
That's terrific. We know from the movie about some of her contributions. I know that you have her performance review, her last performance review at NASA. What did they say about her? What were some of her other contributions?
Oh, Lord. The words I can't really understand, but they said it was stupendous achievement, just gracious, big words. I wrote them down, but I don't know them from memory. And they were saying what she should have done and should have gotten, and that they should award her, and all of her certifications should say stupendous achievement and that kind of thing. And when I ran across it, I said, Mom, this is your last evaluation. She looked at it, she said, he probably doesn't even know who I am. So she was always, demeaning herself. But that was, I showed it to Yvonne. And she looked at me and she said, and she took her 15 minutes to read 3 paragraphs. And I said, well, what's wrong? She said, I can't believe your mother did this. Because, see, she understood technically more than what I would know of what it was. She said, don't ever let anybody say that anybody else did this besides Katherine. And so they knew what her achievements were.
She became a research mathematician. I mean, she's got many documents to her credit. I know that
with other people. She didn't do anything by herself. It was part of, you see, when that space program started, there was no space program. They wrote their first books. NASA needed very, very smart people because they had to come up with ideas. Think of not having any information on space, but you got to go and you got to catch the Russians because they're already working on it. So they had to put theories together and ideas together, and they had to have smart people to do it. She just happened to be there, and it just worked out for her. So she loved it because She always said, I never worked a day in my life. I loved it so much.
Really.
Every morning I was in there.
She, throughout her life, it was through a period of a tough terrain. And as we look at what's happening in the world today, I know for young engineers today, they think they're going through a tough period and things are hard. Any words of encouragement that you would share with them in terms of equity and inclusion and how to address that?
I think I should, can I read this?
Sure.
This thing. My house is a mess because I've got so many things that she has. And I ran across this just recently, and it's on what we call dot matrix because I know she wrote it, right? 100 years ago. And I would just like to read just 2 paragraphs to young people. A pioneering mission for 21st century America. To lead the exploration and development of the space frontier, advancing science, technology, and enterprise, and building institutions and systems that make accessible vast new resources and support human settlement beyond Earth orbit, from the highlands of the moon to the plains of Mars. In 1987, which is when she wrote this, any attempt to motivate, encourage young people to study math and the sciences must be preceded and accompanied by definite targets, objectives. Today, I have some targets which I hope will assist you in giving students the spark needed. Research, thrusts, and exploration. This is where they started. This is how they started. And that was one thing she said.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing
Sure.
her personal reflections and for your commitment to making sure that we all get that firsthand insight into her remarkable journey. And we're so grateful for not only what she's done for our nation, but what she's done for all the individuals in terms of inspiring them to be prepared, to do the work, and to enjoy being a mathematician. We don't hear that very often. Most of the times you tell people you're a math major, people say, oh, I'm so sorry, But in fact, it's wonderful.
If you ask, I still talk almost in the present. If you ask her, what about, she said, well, there's a couple reasons. Either you're lazy or your teachers didn't want you to learn or care whether you learned, or your parents didn't. So those are the things that make people not like it. My kid says, my son who taught math says, what do you do that doesn't include a number? What? Sports, music, spending, so you can't get away from it. So it's better to learn about it than to ignore it.
For sure. That's a great way to end our conversation today. Thank you so much for being with us. We are just honored that you're here.
Thanks for asking me.